We shall now move to questions about the notice. Are there any questions? And I give the call to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. The families of the Bondi terrorist attack victims had to beg the Prime Minister through their grief and tears for a Commonwealth Royal Commission into anti-Semitism. The Prime Minister forced those families to juggle unimaginable grief with national advocacy. It was callous, it was unfair, and they are owed an apology. The Prime Minister dithered and delayed with a host of bogus excuses, citing nameless experts, saying it would take too long, arguing it would platform hate. Not once has the Prime Minister admitted to and said sorry for his mistakes. Can the Prime Minister just humble himself for once and simply say sorry?
Order. Order. We've dealt with this time question before. I hope it will be the same measure applied if any ministers go over time. The Prime Minister has the call.
Mr Speaker, what happened on the 14th of December was a targeted, evil, anti-Semitic terrorist attack on Jewish Australians. And my heart breaks for every person, every family, every community that has been made to suffer because of that senseless, hate-filled violence. I've attended homes, synagogues, private meetings, both in their homes, in my Sydney home for the moment, in my Sydney office with those families. I haven't had TV cameras with me and radio reporters. What I've done is engage respectfully with those people. I've said I feel the weight of responsibility for an atrocity that happened whilst I'm Prime Minister. And as I have said, I am sorry that this occurred. Sorry for the grief and pain that the Jewish community and our entire nation have experienced. Our responsibility is to channel that grief, that pain, that anger into meaningful action, making a difference. And that is what I have striven to do. I've said that we would implement in full the recommendations of the Anti-Semitism Envoy's report. Unfortunately, some of those recommendations, the most serious ones about vilification, did not receive the support of either the Coalition or the Greens in the Senate and therefore were not able to be pursued. We did, in the immediate aftermath of the attack, our priority was unashamedly about the safety of Australians. If you look at what has happened with terrorist attacks overseas, what often occurs is that one attack leads to another coordinated attack somewhere else as part of planning. Our first priority, unashamedly, on the Sunday night, on the Monday, on the Tuesday, on the Wednesday, on the Thursday, was not to worry about politics. Our priority was, were these people part of a cell? Would there be another attack at another place in Sydney? Would there be a follow-up attack in Melbourne? Were Jewish Australians being kept safe? Were the leaders of those communities being kept safe? We upgraded the security measures around the track. Our priority was that. What were the gaps that were missed in security as well through the National Security Committee that has met on almost a daily basis every day since December 14? That was absolutely our priority, was to get that right. Our second priority was to make sure, not that we do something in a year's time or 2 years' time, but to do something immediately. And the Parliament, the House of Representatives, passed legislation, not as strong as we would have liked in tackling anti-Semitism just before question time, but what we could get through. That was our priority, and we called a Royal Commission. Once we had the Royal Commissioner in place, once we had consulted the Jewish community about the terms of reference as well.
Order. Give the call to the member for order. Asking all members to show restraint today, of all days. Give the call to the member for Isaacs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. After the tragic events of the violent anti-Semitic terrorist attack at Bondi Beach last month, how is the Albanese government working to combat anti-Semitism, extremism and hate and keep all Australians safe?
The call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Isaacs for his question, and his commitment, not just as a member of the Australian Parliament, but as also someone who is very committed to helping his fellow Jewish Australians and who travelled to Sydney just in the hours after this terrible attack on the first night of Hanukkah, where 15 Australians were murdered at Bondi Beach. They, of course, wounded dozens more, men, women and children. It was an anti-Semitic terrorist attack aimed at Jewish Australians, inspired by ISIS, the deadliest that has ever occurred on Australian soil. It was also an attack on every single Australian because it was an attack on our way of life in which the Australian covenant is that if people have any prejudice or hate, that's left in the customs hall. And here in Australia we respect each other, of different faiths, of different backgrounds, and we treat each other properly. Now, since the horror of that day, our priority has been to keep Australians safe, to combat anti-Semitism, extremism and hate, to bring an end to violence, to bring the nation together and to wrap our arms around the Jewish community, to be with them in their profound grief. We've announced a Royal Commission into anti-Semitism and social cohesion so people can tell their stories to inform meaningful action. Today, we have passed through this House laws to address both the motivation and the method of the anti-Semitic terror attack at Bondi, because the terrorists had hate in their hearts, but they also had high-powered rifles in their hands. We're taking action on both, tackling anti-Semitism, tackling hate and getting dangerous guns off our streets. On Thursday, we'll come together in a National Day of Mourning, honouring the victims and all those impacted by the violence at Bondi. The theme that the Chabad community have chosen is Light Will Win, a gathering of unity and remembrance. And that is what the local community, led by their spiritual leader, Rabbi Ullman, who I've spoken with again this morning, really want to see. A fitting moment for our grieving nation to come together and reaffirm our commitment that in Australia, light triumphs over darkness.
Give the call to the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. After Australia's deadliest ever terror attack in Bondi, the families of victims wrote to the Prime Minister and said, quote, "We have endured more than 2.5 years of relentless attacks. Our children feel unsafe at school. Our homes, workplaces, sporting fields and public spaces no longer feel secure. It is an intolerable situation that no Australian should have to endure. Prime Minister, I ask again, will you apologise to Jewish Australians because you and your government did not listen?"
The call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I certainly acknowledge very directly the pain that Jewish Australians are feeling and that they have felt for some period of time. The idea that anti-Semitism began with the election of the government in 2022 is just not right. The Executive Council of Australian Jewry on the 25th of November 2018 said that the 12-month period ending 30th of September 2018 saw a 59% increase over the previous year in total anti-Semitic incidents in Australia involving threats or acts of violence. Josh Frydenberg, the then Treasurer, said on 10th of May 2019, anti-Semitism is on the rise here in Australia and the number of incidents has increased quite dramatically. The member for Berowra said on the 7th of May 2019, I find it hard to believe that in 2019 we are witnessing anti-Semitic incidents on an unprecedented scale. Senator Andrew Bragg at the same time, I believe anti-Semitism is a rising problem.
Order, order. We don't need those sorts of commentary. Member for Berowra is entitled to raise a point of order.
Point of order, Mr Speaker, on relevance. The Prime Minister wasn't asked about the history of anti-Semitism in Australia. He was asked whether he apologised for his government failures not to do enough to deal with the anti-Semitism.
Prime Minister, order. As all members know, I can't direct any member to give a yes, no or as the answer you would like. Prime Minister is being directly relevant, giving information to the House about the exact topic he was asked about. The Prime Minister has the call.
Let me be very clear, Mr Speaker. All governments should have done better. That is my point. The idea that anti-Semitism began 2 years ago with the change of government is false, and it's declared to be false by the comments of those opposite in senior positions. Despite the surge in anti-Semitism on their watch, did the Morrison government appoint a special envoy to combat anti-Semitism? No. Did they establish a joint operation bringing together the AFP and ASIO to combat acts of anti-Semitism? No. Did they introduce Australia's first ever hate speech laws? No. Did they legislate a crackdown on preachers and leaders who promote violence? No.
That's right.
We also enacted a landmark ban on the Nazi salute and hate symbols. We criminalised doxing, something that those opposite voted against. We've appointed Australia's first national student ombudsman. We've created and launched a national hate crimes and incidents database. We've imposed counter-terrorism financing sanctions on the white supremacist terrorist network Telegram. We expelled the Iranian ambassador for their interference in Australia. We directed the e-Safety Commissioner to tackle the proliferation of hateful online content. And we have now established a Royal Commission on anti-Semitism and social cohesion.
Order. Give a call to the honourable member for McNamara.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister. What is the Australian government's response to combating anti-Semitism, and why is a bipartisan approach important?
The call to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Defence.
Well, I thank the member for his question. Back in May of 2024, I visited Mount Scopus College, a Jewish school in Melbourne, with the member for McNamara, who is indeed an honoured old boy. And we attended there because the day before there'd been a horrible anti-Semitic slogan spray-painted on the school's wall. It was a clarifying experience for me. It's obviously terrible that kids have to look at that hate directed at who they are, but actually life at the school was an eye-opener. Security there is not unlike security here, but whereas we are adults who have made the choice to be in public life, these are kids who have no choice. And the idea that children are receiving their education, that they are learning to experience the world behind large walls protecting them from the world, is just so sad. And that's not a reflection on the kids. That is, of course, a reflection on the world that is outside. That is a reflection on Australia today. Anti-Semitism has been around for a while, and in truth, that kind of security on Jewish community facilities has been there for many years. But anti-Semitism has become much worse since October 7, 2023, and the way in which life for Jewish Australians has been compromised is profound. It is not okay that Jewish students at universities feel uncomfortable wearing the kippah. It is not okay that Jewish artists have effectively been cancelled. Now, we understand that there is much more to do, but our government has acted against anti-Semitism. We have made more criminal more forms of hate speech. We have appointed an envoy to combat anti-Semitism, and we've now committed to implementing her report in full. And we would have liked to have done more in that regard this week, but we are grateful for whatever we can do this week amongst all of us, because it takes all of us, which is a point that is well made by the American Jewish Committee in its call to action against anti-Semitism, where it says, when considered only through a partisan lens, anti-Semitism is not being countered but instrumentalised. Anti-Semitism must not be a partisan issue used as a wedge within the Jewish community. Especially in advance of elections, we encourage candidates and elected officials to be mindful of politicisation and reach across party lines to address anti-Semitism. These are wise words. We are only going to rid the scourge of anti-Semitism in this country if we all rise above our parties and do it together.
Order. The member for Fisher is just going to cease interjecting because I'd like to hear from the member for Wentworth with her question.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Radical extremism, Islamist and other forms, is a threat to Jewish Australians and all Australians, as we saw so devastatingly in Bondi on December 14. We have had de-radicalisation programs in place for many years, but extremism is still taking root. How does the government measure the current effectiveness of these de-radicalisation programs, and how effective are these programs at all? We do have the Richardson Review and part of the Royal Commission coming up, but is the government planning to take any other actions in terms of de-radicalisation in particular before then? Thank you.
The call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Wentworth for her question, and I praise her unreservedly for her role as a local member in what has been a devastating time for her local community, and not just the Jewish community, but of course Bondi is such an iconic place, and the local member has shown extraordinary leadership and capacity in my view, and I thank her for that. I will ask the Minister to supplement, but I would say that radical Islamic extremism is a major problem. We know that that is the case. We know that hate preachers can cause a real problem in distorting Islam and creating a circumstance where people are full of hate. And we saw an expression of hate motivated by ISIS, an ideology that isn't about any state, is about an Islamic caliphate around the world. Often this is difficult, as the examples come from what is a father and son. It's much more difficult to detect, as the ASIO Director General has reported. A big threat is sole actors, an individual actor. In this case, the father and son discussing these things over the dinner table or in private quarters, not engaging in electronic measures, communication that can be detected, means it is much more difficult. But the government has a range of programs. That is certainly something as well that the Richardson Review will look at, and I'll ask the Minister to supplement.
The Leader of the House.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and thanks, Prime Minister. The counter-terrorism and violent extremism strategy was released again last year, where we renewed the different programs that we run. They're important programs, and there is regular measuring of them. The challenge that we have is terrorism itself is changing as well. If I give simply these statistics, as at January, as at a couple of days ago, we've had, since 2014, 189 people charged as a result of counter-terrorism operations. Right now we have 35 people who are currently before the courts. 18 of the 35 are children. And so what we used to have to monitor in terms of organised cells of people often in their 20s and 30s is very different now. And in terms of the ideology, we are getting mixed ideologies. We're getting seriously mixed ideologies. So you'll have someone, for example, whose ideology will be a mixture of Nazism, of the sort of radicalisation that you've just described, and environmentalism. And this will all be mixed up where the only common theme is violence. That does mean for our agencies the threat now is more complex. People are radicalising younger and faster and predominantly online.
The call to the honourable member for Macarthur.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Attorney-General. What is the Albanese government doing to strengthen our laws to combat anti-Semitism, hate and extremism after the Bondi terror attack?
Call to the Attorney-General.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for his question. On the 14th of December 2025, the deadliest terrorist attack on Australian soil occurred at Bondi Beach. The terrorists had hate in their hearts and guns in their hands. Mr Speaker, let me be clear. Anti-Semitic, hateful and extremist conduct is unwelcome, unacceptable and has no place in Australia. Just 4 days after this abhorrent attack, the government announced a package of legislative reforms to target those who spread hate, division and radicalisation. The government moved with urgency and care, consulting with experts and stakeholders, most importantly the Jewish community, to prepare legislation that deals with both cracking down on hate speech and taking sensible action on firearms. I thank my parliamentary colleagues for their engagement on this legislation. I also acknowledge the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security for its scrutiny of the exposure draft that led to this bill. These new laws being debated in the Parliament today specifically target those who seek to spread hatred, including those who seek to disrupt social cohesion in our community, and so critically, those who seek to radicalise our youth. As the Minister said previously, it is a shocking fact that since 2001, around 120 people have been convicted of terrorism offences, and of that cohort, 10 were children. However, today, of the 35 people before our courts, around half of them are minors. This unprecedented radicalisation of our youth must stop. We will not allow extremists to groom and brainwash our children into radicalisation, hate and terrorism. These new laws also create a regime for listing organisations whose leaders engage in hate speech or promote violence or racial hatred. The laws also amend the Migration Act to introduce new grounds, enabling the minister to refuse and cancel visas on the basis of hate-motivated conduct and offences relating to the spread of hatred and extremism. Organisations that proffer these hateful ideologies must be outlawed, and their composite members must be held accountable. Indeed, Mr Speaker, some of the cowards who spread hate as part of one such group announced they would be disbanding in anticipation of the effectiveness of these laws. The events of the 14th of December were horrific and must never happen again, and these new laws send a clear message that this conduct will not be tolerated in Australia.
Call to the honourable member for Barara.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, New South Wales Labor Premier Chris Minns has said sorry to the Jewish community for his handling of the anti-Semitism crisis that led to the murder of 15 people at Bondi. The Jewish community wants to hear their Prime Minister say sorry. For the third time, why won't you say sorry too?
Order. Call to the Prime Minister.
I repeat that I'm sorry that this occurred, and it occurred on my watch as Prime Minister, something I have said consistently, privately, publicly, said in my first answer as well.
Order, members on my left.
But what I won't do,
Order. The Leader of the Opposition, I am asking all members, I'm pleading with all members to show restraint and respect to people in the gallery, the hundreds of thousands of people are watching this. Our words really matter. I'm asking all of the Parliament to come together so that we can hear the Prime Minister.
Let me just say this. When Port Arthur happened, the Parliament came together. No one saw that as a political opportunity. When because Kim Beazley gave every support, as the Leader of the Opposition indicated to me on the Sunday evening of 14th of December, every support would be given to the government.
Order.
When the Link Cafe siege happened, not a single dollar went to any of those victims from the Commonwealth Government. We provided, though, every support to what was then the Abbott government at that time. When the Bali bombings occurred, people didn't see that as an opportunity for politics. People saw that as the need for the national interest to be put first. I am devastated, as all Australians are, at what has occurred. The fact that I'm Prime Minister while it has occurred, I've acknowledged repeatedly. That is a source of sadness, and I'm sad that every government has not done better on anti-Semitism, including mine. What I won't say, though, is that anti-Semitism began when my government was elected, because that is just absurd. What I won't do, October 7 did happen, and there hasn't yet been an independent review of those events of October 7, but in Israel, because they have been getting on with the response. We responded when October 7 happened.
Order.
We came together in this parliament and passed a resolution unanimously at that time.
Order. Members on my left.
I'll tell you what I won't do. I won't let the terrorists off the hook by pretending that the atrocity that they committed was not the result of their choices and their actions. This was not a random event. This was an anti-Semitic terrorist attack inspired by ISIS, conducted by a father and son, perpetrated in the name of a perverted, murderous version, as they saw it, of Islam. They bought the guns, they fired them into the crowd. They killed 15 innocent people and wounded dozens more. And the idea that they are not responsible for those actions is something that I certainly will not do.
Order. When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the member for Werriwa.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Home Affairs. Why is the passage of the Albanese government's gun reform so important for Australians? What would it have meant to the Bondi terror attack, and what opposition has there been?
Call to the Leader of the House and the Minister for Home Affairs.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Werriwa for the question. In responding to the anti-Semitic terror attack, we need to deal with the motivation and we need to deal with the method. We are dealing with two people there who had horrific anti-Semitic bigotry in their minds and in their hearts, and they had weapons they should not have had as those individuals. I don't think anyone argues that those individuals should have been able to have weapons, and we need to be able to respond to the method that they used as well. The vast majority of gun licence holders in Australia take their licences seriously and are responsible individuals. And I say to those people, these changes are not targeted at you. There are claims that have been made by some of those opposite which are simply not true. Our laws will not be a blanket ban on firearms. Our laws will not stop Australian athletes from competing or accessing the equipment they need. Our laws will not stop pest controllers or sporting shooters, those with a genuine need. Our laws will not stop farmers and primary producers from performing their daily tasks. But the question that is right to ask is what the reforms will do when you reduce the number of guns in the community, when you strengthen the National Firearms Agreement, when you strengthen background checks, when you improve intelligence sharing, and when you restrict licences as far as practical to Australian citizens. And the critical question that came to a head in a vote today where those opposite did not distinguish, they did not seek to amend, they opposed the lot in the way they voted on the gun laws today, is what would these laws have meant for those two men?
Order.
Because there's been a lot of discussion, and we heard the New South Wales debate, should there be 6? Should recreational shooters be able to have 6 firearms? Should it be 4? Should it be 5? How many would those individuals, those two people, how many firearms would they be permitted to have under the laws today that the government supported and the opposition opposed? And the answer is 0. Under those laws, those two people would have been able to access 0 firearms. What are the reasons? Citizens would be only citizens would be able to get a licence. The firearm licence holder was not an Australian citizen. The firearms that they were using would not have been available to them. The son, who didn't have a firearms licence in any event, had he sought one or had the father sought one, Auscheck and the intelligence information that we had would have been cross-checked before a licence could be issued. All of these things result in one very simple question. Do you believe those two people should have been allowed to have those guns? And every member on this side today voted to say no, they should not.
Call to the Leader of the Opposition. The Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Shana Gutnick, whose father was tragically killed during Australia's deadliest ever terror attack in Bondi, publicly wrote, and I quote, "Australia did not fail quietly. It failed loudly, repeatedly and with full knowledge. Its government watched hatred grow and chose to do nothing. They minimised it, they excused it, they dismissed Jewish warnings as noise." Prime Minister, these are not my words. These are the words of the victims' families. Can the Prime Minister finally humble himself and just say sorry?
Order. Order. Member for Fisher. Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I met with Shana yesterday. I spoke with her last week. I spoke with her community leaders. She's from a PARD community in Melbourne on a regular basis as well. Rabbi Moshe Khan, who's a good friend of the member for McNamara. I met her husband. It was a very warm meeting. It was a very warm and generous meeting. And can I say this? The contrast between some of the rhetoric that those opposite have engaged in and the warmth and generosity of this grieving community has been quite extraordinary. I have been into homes, into synagogues, had meetings, had engagements with small groups, one-on-one, with groups of up to 30. First meeting I was in homes on December 16 for the first time. Since then, I must say a number of people I regard now have become friends because of the extent of the engagement. I visited people in hospital. I have engaged with people in every forum, and there is no one who has asked to speak to me who has not had a meeting. And at the same time, what we have had is loud shouting. We had shouting that the parliament had to be resumed before Christmas, but then when we resumed it, we were resuming it too soon. We had shouting that we had to introduce legislation based upon the anti-Semitism envoy's report, but when we introduced it, they opposed it.
Order.
They opposed it.
The Prime Minister will pause. Order. Leader of the Opposition on the point of order.
On relevance, Mr Speaker, my question was very pointed. Can the Prime Minister finally humble himself and just say sorry for failing to act?
Order. Resume yourself. Prime Minister spoke directly about the person that you asked him about. He couldn't be more directly relevant when he described what had happened. That I can't make him do what you wanted the answer, but I can ensure that he is being directly relevant, and he has been completely directly relevant to the question he was asked.
Speaker, you don't have to bang lecterns to show you're concerned. What you have to do is to show respect and engage in an orderly, respectful way. We have responded in that way in the meetings with the Jewish community. We didn't wait. We have appointed the special envoy to combat anti-Semitism. Within days, we began the legislation. We'd already appointed, of course, the National Student Ombudsman. We have appointed David Gonski to look through the education schemes. We've gone through. Professor Craven has been appointed to do the report card as well. We've been going through the envoy's report one by one, and a key element of it was vilification, and they opposed it, and they wouldn't support it. And that's why them together with the Greens were there. At the same time, those opposite, the gap between what they've called for and what has occurred is remarkable. They said they had a package of legislation on January 5. Where is it? Where is it? No one has seen it.
Order.
No one has seen it.
The Prime Minister's time has concluded. Order. Minister for Infrastructure will cease interjecting. The Leader of the Opposition. Order. When the House comes to order. We'll hear from the member for Barton.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Attorney-General. How is the government addressing anti-Semitism and social cohesion after the Bondi terror attack? What role will the Royal Commission play?
Give the call to the Attorney-General.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for her question. There is no place for hate, violence and terrorism in our nation. In the wake of the abhorrent events on the 14th of December, our response as a nation needs to be above politics. It is about the right outcome for our national unity and our national security. Australia needs to heal, to learn, to come together in a spirit of collective strength and to go forward knowing that light will always prevail over darkness. As the Prime Minister said, the government has engaged with members of the community, particularly Jewish Australians, and we have listened. In addition to the legislation outlined in my previous response, the government has established a Royal Commission on Anti-Semitism and Social Cohesion, led by the Honourable Virginia Bell AC. Ms Bell is an eminent and highly capable former Justice of the High Court of Australia. She also served with distinction on the Supreme Court and the New South Wales Court of Appeal. Ms Bell has the deep experience to conduct her inquiry in such a way that meaningfully examines the impact of anti-Semitism on the daily life of Jewish Australians and works to promote social cohesion. She was an exceptional judge, and I have complete confidence that she will discharge her role as Commissioner with the same fairness and impartiality that she brought to the bench. Her appointment has received wide support, including from the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, where its President Daniel Aghion said, "I would say that Commissioner Bell is a retired High Court judge with excellent credentials, and we endorse her appointment." I am pleased to update the House that the Commissioner has now formally commenced her role and is wasting no time in operationalising the Royal Commission. The Royal Commission will be an important opportunity for Australians, particularly Jewish Australians, to have their voices heard and to speak to their experiences. It is also important to note that the Royal Commission must be conducted in such a way that it does not prejudice any future criminal proceedings. The letters patent were very clear on this, and Ms Bell, as Commissioner, is well placed to navigate this task due to her extensive experience in criminal law. The government has asked Commissioner Bell to deliver an interim report to government by the 30th of April and a final report by 14 December. We all want a safer, more unified Australia, and this Royal Commission will be one part of that process.
Call to the honourable member for Barara.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, if a Commonwealth Royal Commission is such a good idea, why did you spend 25 days arguing against it?
Order. Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Barara for his question. We spent the immediate aftermath, as I have said, of the attack on December 14, making assessments based upon how do we ensure that this isn't part of a cell, part of, given ISIS's recognition that were identified very early on by these perpetrators, that we wanted to make sure we put in place the measures that kept people safe. That was the first priority, as you would expect. And we worked on the Sunday night. The National Security Committee met. On the Monday morning, very early, we met as well with New South Wales Police in Sydney, and we continued to meet on a daily basis. We established that we needed to have the Richardson Review, which would look into the operations of the AFP, ASIO, ASIS, the security agencies, but also in the way that they interacted with state agencies as well. And we chose Mr Richardson as the person who is probably Australia's preeminent expert on foreign, international and defence and security issues. We, at the same time, were then convening a process and announced what the principles would be in the legislation that we would bring before this parliament that was passed.
Order. The member for Fisher, no one else is interjecting like this. You're going to cease interjecting for the remainder of question time, or you won't be here. It's not appropriate. No one else is behaving like this. I'm asking you to show restraint. Member Barrera on a point of order.
Mr Speaker, on relevance, my question was not about what were the other matters the Prime Minister was doing, but why did he argue against—
Resume your seat. You specifically said about the timeline, and you gave a number of days, and the Prime Minister is going through, from what I can hear, day by day, as to the reasons you asked him about. So unless he's straying off, I'll make sure he's being directly relevant, but he is answering the question and giving reasons and argument.
The member would be aware also that the New South Wales Government announced that they would have a Royal Commission, and we responded by, at the same time as we announced the Richardson Review, said there would be full Commonwealth cooperation, including access to all personnel, all records and everything, which would have made it effectively a Commonwealth Royal Commission as well. We announced that and said that very publicly. We then, of course, worked with the community on what a Royal Commission might look like, because we wanted to make sure that we got it right. There are risks with the Royal Commission, given that a criminal case will be taking place at the same time, and we need to make sure that was covered. We need to make sure as well that we got the Royal Commissioner right, and in choosing Virginia Bell, I believe we did get it right. We also needed to consult with the Jewish community, and we sat down and went through line by line, days before the Royal Commission was announced, to make sure that that occurred. The character assassination that took place in some sections of the media and was briefed out by some people associated with that side of politics in Virginia Bell shows the problem that would have occurred had we not announced not just a Royal Commission, but who the Commissioner was, what the terms of reference was, and have the support of the community for those terms of reference. I thank ECASH for making sure that that occurred. They engaged respectfully. There was one meeting that went for over 4 hours.
Order. Order. The member for Wannon, I'm asking you to show similar restraint and not to interject for the remainder of question time.
We engaged respectfully. The people who were critical of Virginia Bell did it on social media and publicly as well, very openly, and you know who they were.
Call to the honourable member for McNamara.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Home Affairs. How is the Australian Federal Police working to crack down on anti-Semitic crimes, and what progress has there been?
Call to the Minister for Home Affairs and the Leader of the House.
I thank the member for McNamara for the question, and the answer goes quite specifically to issues around the arson attack against the Adass Israel Synagogue in his electorate. In October, Australian Federal Police Commissioner Chrissy Barrett announced who the Australian Federal Police's #1 priority was. She has not given him a name, nor have I, but his name has appeared in the media. An alleged offshore offender who Australia had rightly deported, who posed a national security threat to our country. Referred to as person #1, he was living offshore. Having been deported, he thought he was out of reach. But he was not out of reach. It is now locked up in Iraq. The person has come up in investigations respect to the illicit tobacco trade, violent and dangerous crimes, other crimes in Australia, and came up in the investigation with suspected links to the firebombing of the Adass Israel Synagogue. After announcing him as person #1 of the priority for the Australian Federal Police, the AFP worked with a number of agencies about the offender. The Commissioner had one-on-one conversations with law enforcement and principals about the alleged offender, and late last year the Australian Federal Police provided information to law enforcement officials around the world, specifically in Iraq, about this alleged offender. Australian Federal Police in using all its capability, partnerships and networks to help ensure this person faces the justice system. The person was announced as the AFP's #1 priority in October and was locked up in Iraq by January. Iraqi officials made an independent decision following their investigations after they'd received information from Australia to arrest the alleged offender after launching their own criminal investigation. He thought he was out of reach, and he was not. He's now in custody in Iraq. I've been repeatedly asked, does Australia have an intention to extradite him, to make him face the full face of the law here in Australia? I'll be frank, he was deported because we don't want him here. We want him locked up, and if the outcome is he is out of Australia and behind bars, I view that as the best outcome we could have.
Give the call to the member for Mayo.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Aged Care. In 2022, there were 60 older South Australians stuck in Adelaide hospitals waiting for residential aged care. As of yesterday, there were 370 stranded, more than a 515% increase. State health ministers are frustrated, so are older South Australians. When will the government act, take responsibility for elderly people in hospitals that need to be in aged care?
Give the call to the Minister for Health and Ageing, representing the Minister for Aged Care.
Thank you. I thank the member for her question, her deep interest in aged care issues in particular, and her engagement with me and with other aged care ministers over the course of this time in government. As you know, there's been quite a deep public discussion about the issue of longer stay older patients in public hospitals across the country, perhaps with the exception of Victoria, where there's a pretty strong state-run nursing home system that takes a lot of those patients more directly. But there's no question the increase in longer stay older patients across the rest of the country is quite significant, and frankly tracks the increase we are seeing in the number of very old Australians as a result of the ageing of the baby boomer population. This is increasing demand for residential aged care, and it is increasing pressure, by extension, on our hospital system. From the first time of the first term of the Albanese government, we have undertaken arrangements with different state governments to fund programs to divert older Australians from hospitals in the first place. They include, in South Australia, geriatric outreach teams that go out to aged care facilities to try to prevent admission in the first place. Those are working very, very well. They're the subject of Commonwealth funding. We're also trying to ensure, as far as possible, that people are able to leave a hospital if they are medically able to do so. That ultimately, in some cases, depends on there being a residential aged care bed available to them, and we know there is a shortage of residential aged care beds right across the system. That is why we put so much energy, particularly under the former Minister for Aged Care, in designing a new aged care system that would stimulate new investment that had fallen off a cliff, frankly, over the period leading into and certainly during the COVID pandemic. Now, we are still engaged with state governments about that. It is a significant part of the negotiations that remain underway between the Commonwealth and all state and territory governments for a new 5-year hospital funding agreement. Quite explicitly, a part of that negotiation has been to continue and maybe extend and expand arrangements, including Commonwealth funding for longer stay older patients, as I said, both to try to avoid them having to go to hospital in the first place, and if they do end up in hospital, a smooth transition out of hospital into an alternative place, whether that's at home with a home care package or into a residential aged care facility. Those negotiations are ongoing. We hope to strike a deal, particularly before the South Australian government goes into caretaker. If we're not able to do that, we start to get right up against the end of this financial year, given we only have a 1-year agreement so far, and this will be a big part of those negotiations going forward.
The call to the member for Bendigo.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Emergency Management. How is the Albanese Labor government supporting communities in my state of Victoria and in Queensland that have been affected by recent natural disasters?
The call to the Minister for Emergency Management, the Minister for Regional Development, Local Government and Territories.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Bendigo for her question. And I've been with her and her electorate the last couple of weeks visiting the fireground and speaking with impacted community members about their experiences. And I want to thank you for your work in supporting the community in the aftermath and what will be a long recovery to come. Mr Speaker, the last few weeks have brought severe weather to large parts of our countries. The bushfires in Victoria have been absolutely heartbreaking for many, and our thoughts are with those that have been impacted by those severe fires, including the family and friends of the man who died in the Longwood bushfire. Whilst assessments are continuing, we currently have 1,300 structures, including 400 homes, that have been damaged or destroyed, and stock losses of up to 20,000. The National Aerial Firefighting Fleet has been active across Victoria and other parts of the country as well. And so far we have committed more than $77 million under our joint Commonwealth State disaster recovery funding arrangements, including $75,000 to primary producers, as well as a range of concessional loans, personal hardship payments and a range of other grants. The Australian Government disaster recovery payment has been made available in 47 locations across Victoria to support those people most impacted. And the disaster recovery allowance, which is up to 13 weeks of income support, is available now in 18 local government areas, as well as the Lake Mountain Alpine Resort to assist those who have lost income. It was a real privilege to meet with emergency service personnel, along with the Prime Minister, many of them volunteers who have been battling bushfires and putting themselves in harm's way to support others. And I know I speak for all Australians when I say we cannot thank you enough. Mr Speaker, as devastating as fires are, we know that floods are also impacting our country too. In December, we saw monsoonal rain across North and North-West Queensland. One man lost his life in floodwaters, and our thoughts are with his family and friends too. Whilst it's too early to determine the full scale of the flooding disaster, it's already clear that losses are going to be significant, with reports stock losses could exceed 50,000. To date, more than $66 million of support has been activated through our disaster recovery funding arrangements. And I travelled to some of the worst impacted areas with the Prime Minister and the Treasurer in early January, where we announced emergency fodder drops, primary producer grants and $11.5 million for critical repairs to the Cloncurry Airport. In Julia Creek, I met grazier Jake Webster, who was helping coordinate fodder drops, not only for his own property but for those of his neighbours as well. And talking to locals on the ground in Julia Creek, in Cloncurry, in Clermont and Richmond, it was clear that whilst these are resilient communities who look out for each other, they need our support too. So I'm proud that we've been able to do that through our disaster recovery funding arrangements activated in 13 local government areas and our disaster recovery allowance activated in 11 local government areas. We will continue to work closely with the Queensland and the Victorian Government on any further assistance that may be required, and our communities will stand behind those that need their support the most.
Yeah. Call to the Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister told Australians that national security experts advised against a Commonwealth Royal Commission. In establishing the Royal Commission, has the Prime Minister defied national security advice, or was he just making stuff up?
Order. Order. Members on my right. Order. The Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition said on the 23rd of December, "I'll continue to call for Parliament to be recalled. It's the comprehensive package that we put forward."
Where is it?
When on 27th of December, every single day the Coalition stands ready to go into Parliament and to move our own legislation. On the 30th of December, we have proposed a comprehensive package of laws that we should be debating in the Parliament right now.
Order. Order. Members on my right, the Prime Minister will pause. The Leader of the Opposition. The
Prime Minister to be so deflective and dismissive of a question on national security really does him no good whatsoever. And I draw your attention and the Prime Minister's attention back to the question about national security advice and the Prime Minister's citing of that advice for not calling a Commonwealth.
The Prime Minister just needs to make sure his answer's being directly relevant.
Absolutely.
He wasn't asked about alternative policies. He was asked about making stuff up.
I was asked about
and
making things up, Mr.
regarding
Speaker.
comments he made.
And I've already said that what we did in the immediate aftermath of the 14th of December attack wasn't to say through when the NSC met, that I can't talk about obviously, but it wasn't in any forum where I was, OK, why don't we set up a committee? What it was how do we act? How do we keep people safe? What do we need to do immediately? That was the priority. But the Leader of the Opposition, during all of that time, which we've seen again today, where in spite of the fact they voted for some of the legislation, voted against the areas of national security, I tell you what, see if you can find a national security expert that doesn't support the gun laws that went through this parliament with the support of this side but not that side. Because one of the problems we've had, Mr Speaker, throughout this is the gap between the rhetoric of those opposite and what they've actually done. They said they had legislation and they didn't.
Order. There's only been one point of order taken.
Yes, and my point of order goes to the order of the House.
Order. Resume your seat. Resume your seat. Resume your seat. Order. Prime Minister was talking about national security advice. I'm going to make sure he returns to that part of the question that he was asked about.
And in the way that this government functions, which is orderly, which is getting things right, which is seeking advice, including of the leaders of the Jewish community, is the process that we put in place. Whether it be the process of the legislation, which they called for and then voted against, vilification, where in all of the negotiations, every single measure put forward by those opposite hasn't been how do we strengthen the legislation, it's been, oh, we've got an internal problem, can we weaken it a little bit here and there? That's been the process, to be very clear, Mr Speaker, of the legislation that will pass the parliament, because we don't have the numbers in the Senate and we had to deal with either coalition or Green support in the Senate, which we have managed to do. But the hypocrisy, Mr Speaker, called for the parliament to be resumed, then said it was too soon, called for vilification laws in the Siegel report, then opposed it, called for all of these measures to go forward, including on security and guns, and then voted against it. What we have done is work with the community in a collaborative way, get things done through this parliament, in spite of, not because of, those opposite.
Order. Give the call to the honourable member for Menzies.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister. How has the Australian government expressed our support for the Iranian people and taken action against the Iranian regime?
Give a call to the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister for Defence.
Well, I thank the member for his question and acknowledge his advocacy on behalf of the Iranian community in Australia. The Australian government and the Australian people stand in solidarity with the brave people of Iran who are demonstrating for their basic human rights against an oppressive regime. And there is absolutely no legitimacy in the Iranian government killing thousands of its own citizens in order for the regime to maintain power. Indeed, this is an outrage, and we condemn it in the strongest possible terms. The Iranian people have been having their voice heard for many years now, particularly Iranian women. And our government has taken strong action against Iran. We have more than 200 sanctions in place against individuals and entities, including those within the regime and members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. We're at the forefront of seeing Iran removed from a UN committee which was focused on discrimination against women. And because of Iranian interference in our own country, we have expelled the Iranian ambassador from Iran. Now, we will continue to work with the international community to put pressure on the Iranian regime in respect of its treatment of its own people and the way in which it engages with the world. That said, there is a significant Iranian community in Australia, and there are Australians who are in Iran. Since 2020, it has been the advice of the Australian government not to travel to Iran. For those Australians who are in Iran right now, our advice is that if it is safe to do so, leave, and leave quickly. This is a volatile situation and it can change very quickly. Our embassy in Iran suspended its operations back in August of last year, so there is little, if any, consular assistance which can be provided right now to Australians who are within Iran, which makes it very important for people to monitor Safe Traveller and keep abreast of its updates, which we will endeavour to put up as soon as possible, as well as availing themselves of the 24-hour emergency consular phone line on +612 6261 3305. For far too long, Iran has been a malevolent influence in the Middle East and around the world. We look with awe at those Iranians right now who are risking their lives to protest against the Iranian government, and today our nation salutes the people of Iran as they bear the torch of freedom.
On indulgence, the member for Barra has indicated he'd like just to associate with the government's remarks, the minister's remarks.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On indulgence, can I associate the coalition with the remarks of the Deputy Prime Minister? The Iranian regime is a criminal regime that commits human rights abuses against its own people, as we've been seeing, and they export terror and violence abroad, as we have suffered in our own country. And we stand shoulder to shoulder with the government in the condemnation of the Iranian regime, in the support for those people seeking to change the regime, and with the Persian community in this country.
That's Mr Speaker. Further questions be placed on the notice paper.